Do you support New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani in his race for the Senate? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Well, as I do not live in New York, I have no particular reason to impose upon myself the necessity of making that choice. And you know, the other day, a reporter asked me what I would do if I were a Democrat having to choose between Bradley and Gore, and I said, well, I hope I'd never be in that position, because it would sort of be like choosing between Satan and Beelzebub, as far as I'm concerned. In the case of Giuliani and Hillary Clinton, though, I think the choice would be somewhat easier, at least if you really had to make it, because obviously Rudy Giuliani at least has the virtue and advantage of being somebody who has, in his tenure in New York City, accomplished some things that actually made sense in terms of crime, in terms of his reform of the administration of the city, and so forth. Personally, would I cast a vote for him? I think I just made that clear. Rudy Giuliani is a pro-choice, pro-abortion person. I will never again cast a vote for anyone who takes that position. And so personally, I'd be kind of left out, even though I understand there's usually a right to life line in New York State that one could vote, or some other line. But I personally will not envisage that possibility, not again. And you might say, well, that's terrible. No, it's not terrible. You know, the Democrats are proud of being the pro-abortion party. I don't see any reason on earth why the Republicans are so ashamed of taking the right position on the most important moral issue of our time. If they don't stop playing games with it, they will lose the majority that has in fact been forged on the basis of their moral commitment to the principles of the country. That doesn't mean that I would seek to drive out of the party every pro-abortion person or pro-choice person. That's not my point. I have to govern my own vote at a personal level. I would certainly, as I will do in the New York State race, I will do my fellow Republican Rudy Giuliani no harm. And I certainly would, in light of his opponent, probably doubly restrain from doing him any harm. But as I don't have to face that choice, I will not have to struggle with my conscience when it comes time to cast a ballot in New York. Though, I would have to congratulate the court in New York, though, because apparently there are a lot of good-hearted, moral conservatives in New York who will now be able to vote their conscience in the presidential primary, because we have overcome the rigging of that ballot, and all the names of the presidential candidates will now be on offer in New York State for their suffrage.
When the Pope speaks out against the death penalty, in particular in the United States, is he right?
Well, you have to understand, at least as I understand, how the Pope has spoken out against the death penalty. Because there is no moral objection in principle to this authority of the state. That has been true throughout the history of the Catholic Church. It is true if you look at the Catechism today. The Pope makes his stand on the issue now based, as I understand it, on an assessment of the sort of current state of affairs in our judicial system and in our penal system and so forth and so on. On those grounds, which have to do not with faith or morals, but with an assessment of the current empirical state of our penology and our social situation and so forth and so on, I feel quite at liberty to disagree with the Pope. And with respect to the death penalty, I believe deeply two things are true. A society cannot afford to send the wrong message to those who in a cold-blooded and egregious way target and take human life, because it is in the way of their purposes. Now, when folks are motivated by passion, when there are other things going on, there is a mitigating element that might lead us to back away from imposing the ultimate penalty. But when, in the absence of that passion, they are like some of the drug lords and other people, just motivated by their own profit and interest, and cold-bloodedly slaughter whoever happens to stand in the way of that interest, then I think that kind of heart being hard to understand, and hard for us to perceive the mercy in it, I think we have to dispatch those people to the God who is the judge of us all and can see into their hearts and understand what might be there for redemption, since we cannot. I also think that the law is, among other things, one of the principal educators in a society. And if you mean for your citizens to take seriously the injunction, thou shalt not kill, then you had best reserve the ultimate penalty for those who do so in an egregious, cold-blooded way that assaults not only the life of another, but in many instances also the structures of the society put in place, law enforcement officials, courts, to protect that life. For all those reasons, I believe it is an imperative of the respect for life that we retain as an element of law in certain limited cases the death penalty. And that if we do not, then we risk applying an egregious, I think, relativism to the business of our respect for life. Why do I say that? Well, I say that for this very reason. Some people say, well, that's in contradiction of your pro-life stance with abortion. No, it's not. Not unless we see no moral difference between the innocent and the guilty. A moral difference that is clear in Scripture and has been clear throughout the moral history of humankind. And that is why it has been considered particularly abominable when one assaults the innocent life of babes, dashes their heads against a stone, and does other things that sometimes characterize the most heinous brutality in war. Those assaults against the innocent are precisely the undoing of all decent moral conscience. And that would mean that we must reserve for them the kind of penalties that are required in order to show our respect for life. So again, I see a major difference. If you can distinguish between guilt and innocence, then you can distinguish between the abortion case and the death penalty case. Final point. It does behoove us, though, and I think here out of respect for the very concern that is raised by the pontiff, to look at our justice system. And I would say that in and of itself, in principle, the death penalty has a moral basis. If you carry it out in a way that is careless and discriminatory, and that in fact does not take care that we are making the most conscientious effort to ascertain guilt or innocence according to due process and the law, that then becomes a reason for suspending or opposing it. But this is not an argument in principle to remove the death penalty. It's actually an argument to improve the integrity of that judicial process.